going there, never back down. We on that hard trip, going there, never back down. We on that hard trip, going there, never back down. We on that
Awesome, talofa lava and taloha ni, and a special malolele to everyone that's listening and to everyone that's watching today. Welcome back to the Fresh Truth podcast. Dun, 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 dun. With me, Ronji, and the brother Kanan here in the beautiful capital of the whole universe, which is in South Auckland. Hey family, I love what the psalmist says in Psalm 90 verse 12 when and that's Moses that writes that psalm, when he says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And that idea of urgency and the shortness of time, James the apostle picks up on that in James 4 verse 14 when he says, yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. For you are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. And so what a blessing it is to have life and to be alive right now according to God's will, and to use whatever time we've got left for God's glory. So welcome to everyone that's listening. Thank you for those who have been listening or watching, and keep engaging with us on social media or email or smoke signals or letters or postcards or anything else. Family, we are in for a massive blessing today because we are going to hear from a very talented and intelligent younger sister named Ala Teo. So Ala, how are you?
I am well, Ranji, thank you.
So is that your full name, or what's your full name?
Yeah, my full name is Alapasita Lusana Teo.
Okay, can I just call you Ala? Is
Yeah,
that all right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. So
See why
welcome.
you shortened it.
That's why she's and so Ala's her rap hip hop name. Are you looking forward to the podcast, Ala?
Yeah, this is my first podcast, so it's going to be
Awesome.
an experience.
Well, we'll send you our bank account so you can tithe into the podcast, because Kanan and I believe in prosperity. Hey family, in today's show, we're discussing what it means to be salt and light on social media. Those are some really fancy biblical terms there, but essentially the show is about trying to work out as Christians how Christians can continue to engage in various social media platforms and continue to maintain a strong biblical witness in those areas. And sort of we believe it's really important because in this age of digital technology and Snapgram and Facebook and InstaChat and whatever else you young people call it, hey, it can either be a really cool place to represent Christ or maybe a pretty dangerous place to try and represent Christ. So, Ala, quick question. What's your basic view of Christians engaging in social media?
I think it definitely is a platform to witness and be salt and light, as you alluded to earlier. It's tough. It is tough. I think in terms of like wider things happening globally, big tech, there's a lot of censorship around what is usually deemed as conservative, but at the root of it is Christian. So lots of, I guess, mainstream accounts, media and social media that are Christian by nature don't even get to make it to mainstream media because they are already being shut down at that sort of big tech level. So it's definitely a space to witness and to be sanctified in. Social media, it's a bittersweet field for me.
Okay, very good. And you've heard a short taster from Allah there, and we're going to touch on some of those things around censorship or what it means to be a witness or how to handle different things, maybe when you're being trolled online or maybe you can't even share some of your views. I just want to quickly check in with Brother Kanan. How are you, bro?
I'm good, man. How are you?
You are looking fine. Your studio is looking quite awesome.
Slowly getting there.
Slowly getting there. So what's new in life, bro? What's been happening?
I'm getting married. I'll just list all the different things that are happening.
Okay, getting married, yeah.
So getting married, picking up a few jobs, contracted jobs, finishing off a documentary, and I'm working on a health campaign at the moment with the health promotion agency. So it's been pretty busy.
Awesome.
The last 2 months.
And that's why family, Kanan's been a real blessing, and he's a busy man with his media stuff and signing autographs everywhere, but it's always a blessing to have him here. Kanan, I know you're a bit of a social media guru as well. You're on a whole bunch of platforms?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Those are the four ones that I'm
Four ones that you use. And so you might have some hard questions for our special guest today, Allah?
For sure.
Awesome. Can you ask those questions in Greek and Hebrew just to make sure that we're keeping biblical with our questions, okay? So, well, we've heard from Kanan, and he's going to be asking some questions today. And we, before we get back to Allah, and we sort of dig into some of the things that we're discussing, just want to quickly again remind people what Fresh Truth is about. Fresh represents the fact that we're Pacific or Polynesian as a background, and that's our context. And so that's where we're coming from, especially here in beautiful South Auckland. But truth represents our passion for biblical truth and God's word. We are unashamedly Christian, whether we get censored or not, whether the two people that are listening like it or not, but we are unashamedly biblical and focused on God's word. And Fresh Truth is a group of Bible-believing Christians from Pacific Island or Polynesian contexts, but living in South Auckland, who are unashamed of the gospel. We love God's word. We love sharing the good news of the gospel to others and standing up for biblical truth, both in our neighborhoods, in our local areas, but also nationally if we get the chance. And we want to interview amazing guests like Allah, to learn about their journey with the Lord, but also to discuss some of these massive issues. And if you've been listening before, we've been talking about house churches. We've been talking about Te Ao Māori. We've been talking about colonialism. We've been talking about how all of those things, quote unquote, intersect. Hey, that's a fancy word right now, but how those things intersect with the biblical and Christian worldview. So again, that's who we are as Fresh Truth. So let's get back to the heart of this podcast, and we want to get back to the key person for today, which is Allah. I have a connection with Allah through my beautiful wife, Bina. They were both students at New Zealand's second-rate university. No, it's a really good university. Is it a good university, Allah?
The best.
The best. So Allah, they're both students at Otago University, where Allah and Bina studied and got their 22 degrees that they got between them with huge student loans. And so that's my connection with Allah, knowing her for a long time and come to know her as a woman that loves the Lord and is very clear about her passions for the Lord and for people. So Allah, again, we've heard about your name. So can you share a little bit about your background, villages? Are you married, single, divorced? Are you on dating websites? What's happening in that world? But just quickly introduce yourself for everyone that's listening or watching, please.
Sure. Malolele talofa love, everybody. My name is Ala Pasita Teo, or Allah. It is Tongan for alabaster.
Oh,
so I'm
Did you know that, Kanan?
I did not know that.
There we go. Very biblical.
So I'm named after both my grandmas. I'm Tongan Samoan. On my Tongan side, my father is from Lofanga Ha'apai, Hasini Mo'a Tongatapu, and my mother is from Wata'a Upolu Samoa. Woo-hoo. So I am the best of both worlds.
Yes.
There's a bit of European in there, as we know historically. There are traits in the Pacific, that you won't
Especially
see.
in Tonga, right? Especially in Tonga.
Especially in Tonga. I am dating, so not single.
Stop the press. Stop the press. Kanan. Those sound effects.
And what were your other questions?
So, where did you grow up?
Oh, yes. So actually, I grew up in Tonga. My family migrated here when I was 10, so about 21 years ago, and moved to South Auckland, to Mangere East. So grew up Mangere East, Mangere, grew up in Southside, went local schools, Mangere East Primary School, Kedgley Intermediate, and the infamous Otahu College.
My God. That's pretty much a Tongan high school. That's just pretty much it. Everyone at MMT goes to that school.
Second to Wesley.
Second to Wesley.
I think that's where people migrate to, is to Wesley. And then, grew up in Southside, then moved to Dunedin at the age of 18 to study, and have just returned home.
So you just came back to Auckland?
Correct.
So how long have you been in Dunedin for?
13 years.
What were you doing other than getting a big student loan?
Well, partial. I'm paying it off. So I went down to study. So I did a P degree, did that with honours, and then went on and did my postgrad and masters in public health, and just got snatched up with some work. So I worked as a researcher for a number of years, and then went on to work as like a projects lead for the University of Otago's Pacific Development Office. So overlooking a lot of their strategic imperatives to do with Pacific.
Cool. So where does the social media world fit in? Is this more personal passion, or is it something that you're engaged in with work or outside of work?
I wouldn't call it a passion. As I said earlier, I saw it as a platform to educate.
Cool.
So my background, I guess my world, professional-wise, is in academia. But we know with academia, there's a lot of jargon and big words that, don't always resonate with the average Joe or, Mary next door. So I saw social media as a way to simplify a lot of things that happened, mainly in sort of policy space, around social issues that not always my friends or family knew about but they wouldn't necessarily go to the news, but they'd go to social media. So I saw it as a way to, I guess, disseminate information that was hopefully accurate and resonated with people.
Cool.
I wouldn't say I'm passionate about social media.
But you use it, obviously.
I use it, yeah.
Because if you didn't, then this show would be a waste of time. It would be just that me and Ken would just be talking about rugby league or something. But
I'll try that too.
Okay, cool then. Well, it's good to have you here to talk about that. I just want to touch, so you obviously half Tongan, half Samoan, and special news flash, dating. I didn't know that. My gosh, I sort of have to call Women's Weekly a new idea and all those Kanye and Kim Ye and whatever else. But I just want to quickly touch Allah on the God factor. So how did you come to faith in Christ? I know that's a big question.
Yeah.
But how did you come to faith in Christ, and where does Jesus sort of fit in with your life today?
Yep. Jesus is Lord and Saviour. I came to Christ or heard the gospel at the age of 18. So my family grew up in a church home, you could say, but growing up around Christian values doesn't always mean you hear the gospel. So on my Tongan side, my family's a heavy Wesleyan family, but there was always that slight language barrier in terms of church and a lot of the preaching that went on. So I always had a yearning as growing up for a desire to know more of the Lord through His Word, and that wasn't always made easy at Sunday school or things like that. So I had a friend from intermediate, her and a friend from her church shared the gospel with me outrightly.
Intermediate?
No, my friend was from intermediate, but I reconnected with her later on in high school. Yeah, so we'd connected. We were at Massey Park in Mangere East. We were just chilling and
smoking, drinking. That's
we were just. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But we were we were talking to the Lord.
Very good.
And God was gracious enough to share. The gospel. The gospel was shared to me right before I went to varsity.
Is that right?
Yeah. So August of 2007.
So you're going down to Otago with this new faith.
Yep.
Come from a sort of religious background.
Yep.
So how did you, and this wasn't in the question list, but how did you maintain your faith or continue, that you're just going into a new city, new place, new environment. How did you continue walking with the Lord in that real big shift?
Yeah. Honestly, in all honesty, looking back, only by God's grace. So usually what happens when you go to Dunedin, you go into a hostel, and that hostel's quite hostile towards Christ. So it's very, very worldly. Drinking, all these teenagers, hormones, all these things. Yeah, it's kind of like all those pagan cities we read of in the Old Testament.
Yes.
So
Manurewa, Papakura, those kind of.
Yes, correct. So that was the environment I was going into. Had no idea that was what I was going into, but God was gracious enough to place me in a flat with all Christians.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So if anything, my faith grew down in Dunedin. I fell off by the wayside, as you do when you are trying to stay to the narrow path. But found church right away. So that's how I met your beautiful wife, Bina, who was a student pastor and, a Paul to a Timothy in a modern day setting. Church community and Christian friends.
Cool.
And so I can't put it down other than that was all the Lord's doing. He'd provided me with a community that sharpened me and, pointed me to Him always, and in an environment that is still very anti-Christ.
I think that kind of discussion is really important when you think about a lot of our Māori and Pacific students that are travelling nowadays, and they're going to different places, transitioning into different cities. And if they're going with faith, it's hard enough to go to a hostile environment, but to continue their walk in the Lord can be very difficult. So getting connected to friends, to good churches, to some good, strong support networks is really important. So that wasn't part of the question, but I found that really interesting. Ala, what other passions do you have? So what else are you involved in? Are you a break dancer? Do you ride horseback? What else? What are the things that you do?
I'm a pretty active person. I love sports. I love being active, love hiking, walking, being outdoors. What else? I like reading, love reading books. I'm big on history, so
Do you do any extreme sports? Because Kanan does a whole bunch of extreme sports, like sort of
So just
skydiving.
extreme like this.
extreme like these ones. Yeah.
No, other than maybe hiking. Some of the
Okay,
hikes
okay,
around New
that's
Zealand are pretty extreme.
There's a whole bunch of extreme things around. Ella, I want to quickly get to know you a little bit better, but
Sure.
with some of the fun stuff. So here's some real direct stuff. Favorite food?
Asian food.
That's a pretty big.
Yeah,
Anything
I like-
Asian.
yeah.
Okay, anything Asian. Cool. Favorite sport?
Oh, rugby league.
Yes. That's why I knew I liked you. I like what bless you. Favorite music that you listen to?
Oh, I love R&B.
Okay.
Second to gospel.
Is that connected to the dating thing and that kind of
No,
stuff?
no, far from it.
Because Kanan was wanting me to answer that. Okay, just checking. Yeah. Cool. Favorite movie?
Oh, love sports movies and historical movies. Remember the Titans?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Left side.
Right side.
For someone to do it.
I was waiting for
Strong side, you
Sorry, I was waiting for Kaden.
Kanan's going, this, I'm too young to know him.
It's a classic.
I've seen it, but I don't remember the lines.
You guys are useless, man. Anyway. Cool. So, so sports kinds of movies, historical ones.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Last question, this one. Favorite character in the Bible that's not Jesus?
Oh, favorite character in the Bible that's not Jesus. Man, that's a tough one. They're all great.
It's all about the tough questions
Yeah,
here
yeah.
in Fresh Truth.
Rahab.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I love her story, and yeah, that she loved the Lord even not being in the culture. I don't know how to explain this, but I love how God brought her into the fold, and how He protected her in a time where she could have really been killed. Yeah, lived in a hostile environment, an anti-God environment, but still was believed in the God of Israel.
Very good. Well, that's probably a good segue into trying to drill into some of these key areas around the social media stuff. And I think, and people might disagree with us and think, well, actually, it's not that hostile a world, eh? But I would totally agree with you when it comes to hostility towards the Christian worldview, or even conservative views, but definitely the Christian worldview. So my first key question around this area is, what do you think about media in general in New Zealand? You can be as critical as you want or as loving as you want, but what do you think? And I'm talking media here in general.
Right.
I have to do a lot of media for work, and
Yeah.
I can see the biases that exist in our media system at the moment. So I wanted to see what your perspective was.
Yeah. Recently, probably in the past 2 years, I don't really watch the news anymore. It's a huge, in terms of ideological shift towards the left, very biased, very hard to say if it's facts that they report on or emotions. So I'm not a big fan of the media. There are some pretty centered people who try to stay objective, have journalistic integrity. It's hard to come by that these days, and it's hard to figure out whether this current government is in the media or whether how much of an influence they have in these pieces that pump out. I wouldn't say it's always accurate or facts, factual based truth, So I'm not a big fan of the media. They play a huge role, especially in this world and age of like vast information, fast information, misinformation. The media is right in the mix of it. So
I saw this with the cannabis referendum and the euthanasia referendum. There was an analysis of the cannabis stuff, and I think it was 3 times to 1. So it was 3 times more coverage for the yes vote than it was for the no vote. And it clearly showed the bias that the media had. And I was just wondering if, as you were observing the elections last year, is that something that you sort of noticed, or is that something that you picked up?
Huge. So I got amongst the the discussions.
The discussions.
I like to call them. That's right. The funnels. I like to call them discussions because they are discussions of values and morals and I guess ideologies that shape how a person views these issues. So I've been off social media for about 7 months.
Okay.
But
is that
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's a sanctifying process between the Lord and I. But I was on social media at the time, mainly on Twitter and Instagram, and it was pretty interesting seeing just sort of how much the media swayed towards the yes vote, and even newspapers. Like I saw a massive like front page ad of the yes vote, and it's subliminal. Like sort of what the media does is that they it's kind of like advertising. It's subliminal. It seeps into your mind without you knowing it, but you see it every day. So that was a lot of what was behind. Well, from my perspective, behind the yes campaign, it was normalised this. How do we normalize a drug? Like it's a drug, point blank. It's a toxic substance. There is no okaying it, but to advertise it freely as something that is normal. That isn't normal because we know it's destructive. It destroys families, it destroys communities, destroys individuals, and we all carry that price of that breakdown in that family unit in person as a society. So yeah, I got into it. My background is in research, so I enjoy learning. As a person, I can be argumentative.
No, surely not. No, I refuse to believe that.
I can hold it down in a discussion, but when the discussion is very biased and there's no sort of trying to, because what I saw was that the no camp there was always a graciousness they afforded to the other camp in terms of trying to understand their yeses, but the hypocrisy is that the yes camp wouldn't extend the same.
That's the intolerant tolerance.
Yeah, it's that whole cancel culture. Just because you disagree on the facts doesn't mean they're not a fact. Like facts exist regardless. It's like the weather. Like if it's rainy, we can't dispute that because we both feel that it's wet and it's raining. So today, during that cannabis, I got into a few heated social media.
So what define? I know this is jumping a little bit, but it's really interesting.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So what does heated mean? Like was it swear words?
No,
you guys throwing up your gang signs? I'm going to get my uncle to beat you up. What does heated mean?
It was probably more a lot of to and froing, between myself and this other girl on Twitter, and it was actually over one of your panels where she sort of started saying that what she was saying was that the no argument still doesn't make sense if you da-da-da-da. So I don't often get into social media, trolling. I always try to look at the argument and then dismantle the argument, or at least present a different perspective on it as opposed to attacking the person's character.
Can I just touch on that then? So would that be one of your key tips then? If you are going to engage in some sort of social media discussion around an issue, whether it be cannabis, whether it be the Christian worldview, whatever, then just focus on the argument. Don't get caught up in the trolling bits they go after.
I think when you attack a person's character, you've lost. I guess from my perspective, if it gets personal, then I've won. Because you haven't been able to, we're arguing the content. When you go away from the content, then you've already lost.
So were they criticizing you as a person?
No, they were criticizing you as a person. So it might have been personal from my end.
275-7710. If you want to meet, I'm happy to meet. I've got no problems going back to the dark days before the cross.
It started more from that, and then we got into the no argument.
Right?
The no? Yeah. So we agreed to disagree actually, and so that was probably my first taster of it. And then the other one, which we'll touch on later, was the Israel Folau.
Okay.
Yeah. So I piped up about that as well, because a lot of, I guess, friends and followers on my social media know that I'm Christian, but they are respectful enough to discuss. But what I do is also extend the invitation to discuss in person.
Oh, very good.
So I offer. Would
that be another tip that you would offer?
Well, I don't. It depends. I think if you're comfortable with that, I am. I personally am comfortable with. I prefer 100. You can't do much of 150 characters in terms of trying to convey an argument. So I'd prefer this. So I would always extend the offer to meet somewhere for coffee and let's discuss in person.
Have people taken up the offer?
No. But I would always extend it because I said, oh, look, this is probably a discussion we could have in person. Let's talk more. I would love to hear what you have to say. I guess over the years, I've sort of learned that it's important to listen to understand as opposed to listening to rebut.
Yes.
Yeah. Probably in my younger days, I would listen to rebut, but I do a bit of both. But I always try to, in terms of social issues and online, because you're only seeing a snapshot of that person's argument or themselves as opposed to a whole picture. So it's sort of hard to make a judgment call based on those things. Yeah.
So let me get this right. So you've self-excluded yourself from social media.
Yeah.
That happens in the gambling industry as well. We do that at the gambling industry. You're allowed to self-exclude when your addiction is... And that's, I think it's a very... Why did you do it? Had it become an idol? Had it become... did it taken too much of your time? Why did you do that?
I think it was becoming idolizing.
Wow.
For me personally anyways. Sort of this idea of waking up and then wanting to see what can I be mad about, as opposed to be like, well, I should wake up and turn to the word first, as opposed to wake up and what can I post on my story to educate people. So it got to there's pros and cons to social media. So at that stage anyways, this was last year, there was God had brought me to a point of checking in with him where he was like, actually, I don't really think your conduct is reflective of Christ. So did
you get to that yourself, or did other people say, hey, look, sis, that stuff is getting too far?
No, that was me. That was the Lord actually. Because it was, as I said, my nature is I can be combative, but I wasn't combative in a godly sense. So
can I just ask then, if someone's listening and maybe they're engaging in a whole bunch of social media, but then they might be at a crossroads saying, is this become an idol? Has this become prideful? Has this become ungodly?
Yeah.
What are some of the signs that you think we need to keep an eye on to make sure that as Christians, our social media stuff is quite healthy? Do you understand the question?
I think at the forefront of anything I had posted was, what does this reflect about Christ? Is this reflecting His character? Some of my posts weren't, because they were sort of quite. I like this thing where I like to. What is it called? Pull apart the government and what they do, or lack of things that they do. But the word tells us that we, submit to authority and respect and honor that, because that is God. The Lord governs those things. So I think there were just, honestly, it was the Lord. It was a point of always checking in. When it gets to a stage where you're checking in with social media first instead of God's word, then that's when that's problematic.
Yeah. I was watching this doco about the sort of mental endomorphin kind of scientific stuff that kicks off about getting likes. Yeah. And all that kind of stuff, and that stuff that buys into your body, your mind following just the hunting after the social media presence. And it sounds like, as Christians, that's something we need to be really wary of, that social media is a platform to engage. It's not the platform to live our lives. And that's something that would you encourage Christians to be careful and potentially self-exclude like you have if things go too far?
Yeah, I think when it gets to a point where the priority is social media as opposed to, the Lord and things of the Lord, then that's like, to me, that's a red flag, because you're getting your feeding and your, affirmation from things of the world. Stuff. So the things that you should be feeding that, like the word and being in fellowship and church, if those things start to take a back seat.
Very good.
Yeah, that is a huge red flag, and that's the danger as well of social media. It's subtle, just like how the enemy is. He's subtle. He's always encroaching. He's always looking for ways to deter your attention from the things of the Lord. And social media is one of those things. If you don't check yourself, just like when you eat, you're not always going to eat junk food, right? And social media has some nourishing things, and it has a lot of junk food. So if you're always consuming the junk food, you're not going to be healthy. Very good. Yeah, you're going to crash. So like with anything that you consume in huge amounts, there needs to be balance and adjustment as you know.
And we do want to touch on some of the more positive parts of social media as a Christian as well. But I just wanted to ask, are you going to come back onto social media? Like, is there going to be a press release? Is there going to be a leaflet drop and say Allah is back?
But have a launch party?
Launch party. There we go. And stream it live. But are you going to come back online?
Oh man, I keep getting asked that, and that's not to boast in my pride. I think a lot of my social media in the past has been really breaking down social issues in a way that's like digestible to just your everyday person, but also presenting like a Christian perspective on it. So I'm still praying about it, I'll be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know at this stage, but if the Lord changes that, then sure.
Kanan, how do you do it then, bro? I've just heard how tough it can be. I'm on one social media really, and I can't be stuffed even doing that one. How do you handle all this stuff?
So a lot of my work is actually social media based. We run a lot of like social media campaigns and stuff. So for me, there's sort of like not really like I can't compartmentalize like, oh, this is work, this is personal. So it's like sort of interwoven into my life, but I've deactivated my accounts a couple of times just
Because it got too much?
because it gets too much. It's from time to time. I mean, Allah will know, on Twitter it gets very heated on Twitter, and I think I was like you. I used to engage in a lot of those discussions. I still do from time to time. But yeah, there are a lot of lost people on social media, but also it gives you a platform to air out opinions that you wouldn't say in real life, And I think,
and I find that one of the dangers is that there's no filter there. Hey, like stuff that people are saying openly online. I would never guess that they say that in person, face to face. So is this something that your generation is facing, or even old people like me? Is my generation facing this kind of challenge as well? I'll go to Kanan first.
I think it's definitely something that it's like a new mission field, I guess. But it's also like we need to be very cautious of how our young people, our youth, people my age, even people younger, are utilizing social media. Do you remember those videos that I sent you from TikTok, man?
Freaky stuff.
It's like
and unbiblical.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of unbiblical. So for me, although there's a lot of like secular or atheist, a lot of that agenda pushed on social media, a lot of progressive agenda, if there are no Christians in those spaces, then they will be indoctrinated by all of these other ideologies. So I think for me, it was really important to voice a biblical opinion.
So you need to be in that game to be able to influence it.
Yeah. I'm not saying that I need to be. I'm not trying to justify me, but I think there definitely is a need for more Christian voices.
Very good.
On the internet and on social spaces.
Allah, would you agree? Is this something that we need to be thinking more of? Even I like just using Kanan's words, a new mission field, ministry. Is this something that we as Christians need to target, not just to promote stuff, but to actually engage in the gospel?
Yeah. I mean, the gospel it applies irrespective of the ages. The word tells us that His word is everlasting. Everlasting means that it's throughout all generations, so it's applicable regardless. It's the human factor in it that comes into tension. So I agree with Kanan. There's a lot of just some really evil things out there, which I think, I think also that if you're not necessarily feeding yourself with the word, it gets to you, like it would always get to me there. So I used a lot of my social media to engage the audiences that I was not preaching to, but in terms of social issues around like abortion and euthanasia. So that took up quite a bit of my time, but that was just out of like trying to educate, I guess you could say, the masses around actually this is only, you're seeing one side of the argument, this is the other side. And that got I got into a bit of heat about that. But I guess for me, my personal stance is if whatever I say online, if I can't say it in person to that person or whomever, then I won't say it. So everything that I made sure that I posted online, I say to your face. So I never shied away from that, which is why I always extended like, hey, this conversation is better suited in person. Let's hash this out. So, because obviously you might want to say more, I want to say more. So that was always a checkpoint for me, is that, well, can I say this in person? Can I say it in front of them? If not, then I'm not going to say it.
I think what I'm getting as an old man just sitting listening to you young people here is I can see we obviously know the power and the reach of social media, and especially as Kanan chucks a couple of different things at me around social media over the last couple of months.
Right.
Hey, it really is a mission field, and I wonder if it's something that as the church, the wider church of God here in New Zealand, that's something that we don't fully get. We don't fully know how to work. And I know that there's other really media savvy ministries out there like Apologia Studios and others that are really, Richard Radio, Richard TV, that are really working in that space in America and around the world,
Yeah.
but not necessarily here in New Zealand. And I
Or
guess,
even the Southern Hemisphere, there's nothing really.
yeah,
out
okay.
here.
I was wondering that about. I guess you could look at something like the Australian Christian lobby, but they're more traditional forms of engagement. Eh? So, look, as an old fella here, and I think maybe having some of the talent, the young talent and ability, I think that's a real challenge for the body of Christ here.
Yeah.
How do we actually engage with this stuff properly for the gospel? I understand for social issues, to give a perspective on abortion, euthanasia, homelessness, that stuff is valuable, but also clearly having gospel discussions or transitioning those social discussions
Into
or
gospel
into
discussions.
gospel
Yeah.
discussions. And so I think that's something, look, if you're listening and you have ideas about this stuff, or you want to engage more with this stuff, or if you've got some questions or ideas that Kanan or Ala or myself would really benefit from, especially from these younger generations, man, feel free to holler.
Yeah.
Man, we'd love to learn and understand more about how we can reach these different generations.
Correct.
Hey,
Yeah.
you talked about the generations, Allah, for the gospel.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
So that's huge. I got a question here about hate and trolling. You sort of touched on it before about wanting to box people. No, sorry, that would be my approach. Sorry, that would be my approach. I'd bring boxing gloves, but anyway, but I'd go old school. But how do you handle it? Like, I mean, you sort of talked about it, but you also talked about how a lot of this stuff you were doing on your own. Hey, so how do you handle this hate and this trolling when you're maybe not getting support from a local church? Or, like, how do you do this kind of stuff?
That's a tough one. I think it really depends. I mean, in my mind, the person that might be in disagreement with me is still a person made in the Lord's image.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, so with that comes, the word tells us, how we're to treat others, brethren, whether they're walking or not, how to treat them because they're made in His image. So that's always at the forefront. The flesh in me would like to
box their ears and
stuff. But by God's grace, we extend that grace that's been extended to us is always my thing. We forgive because we've been forgiven. So I don't get a lot of hate, I think, because I try to be fair. But often the hate, you could say, it's a strong word, but the hate, it'll be around, a Christian worldview, like the whole Israel Folau thing. Yeah.
Well, I found it interesting when I did some of the cannabis stuff last year, and I think my wife Bina was gonna, throw up her blood signs, and she's gonna get her machete and that kind of stuff. Because some of the stuff, the trolling that came out of that was really difficult.
Yeah.
It actually got to a point where Bina and I actually went and sought help and prayer from an older Christian couple.
Yeah.
Because it was. Like, one, I just wanted to go stab everyone else. I was sort of getting angry, then I realized I can't do that, I'm a Christian. But, that stuff was really hard. And yet at the same time, if that stuff happened to me face to face, I'd be happy with it, because Jesus says in John 15, if they hated Him, they'll hate me
Correct.
also. I know I'm going to be hated, but
Yeah.
to have it done virtually, digitally from online people around the world, I found really difficult. And so I just wonder how Christians, if they're going to engage in this battle, how they stay safe. And for me, I don't know what Kanan or you, Allah, think, but for me, when we're ministering out of this stuff, whether it's street evangelism, abortion stuff, youth ministry, whatever, it needs to come out of the local church. If those things aren't grounded in the local church, any form of ministry, I think we're missing something, that support from the body of Christ. What do you guys think? Kanan, what do you think about that?
I don't want to spiritualize it, but I think you definitely need to discern when someone is being genuine in discussion or someone's just trolling you.
Yeah, very good.
I think maybe
It's
discern's the wrong word, but being able to identify when someone is just arguing for the sake of arguing, or they're actually genuinely want to understand or genuinely believe that they're quite firm in their stance.
Sure.
But also identifying that in yourself. Are you arguing? Why are you arguing? I guess is the question I'd put out. But even it's like choosing when is it the right time to,
and it's a whole
have
bunch
that
of
discussion.
wisdom involved. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Probably same as Kanan. Yeah, choosing your battles. Not all battles are meant to be fought. But I guess for our young people, I always tell friends that make sure that you're engaging in the Word and the Lord first before you look to go save the world type thing.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, you can't save the world. So I think it's just like those personal disciplines in terms of spiritual disciplines that you need to get down packed first as someone who engages in social media, because when that starts to slip, then you don't be surprised when the enemy starts to weed in other doctrine or theology that starts to replace, scripture as authority. So,
but then if we were engaging in any ministry, we should be doing those disciplines anyway, right?
Correct.
Hey, so
Correct.
I think it's just, I guess what I'm learning from you too, especially from you, Allah, is that actually, if we're going to engage in this stuff, it is part of our spiritual discipline, but making sure that we're right with the Lord, have our time with Him, time in His Word. I guess where I'm coming back again is, how does the church respond? How does the wider church respond in terms of engaging and reaching out in a godly, humble way to engage people with the gospel in these platforms? And maybe that's why Kanan's been throwing these different videos at me, because I think those things are real thought-provoking. And I guess that's where we're at with this podcast, because it's about trying to provide content that would hopefully challenge some of the mainstream views that are out there that go against God and His Word.
I guess what I've seen abroad, especially in the US, is like the platforms, the Christian platforms that are also biblically sound. They don't shy away from the cultural issues, things around like critical race theory and postmodernism, which are like all academic terms, but they engage with the gospel, and the gospel is relevant to all things. So I don't know how we would do that in New Zealand, but I know in some of the, like, I'm only on Facebook, and some of the people I follow engage in that, and they always bring it back to the gospel. So I don't know how we can do that in New Zealand.
It's hard in New Zealand because we're small enough to, we're not big enough to have a disagreement and still sit right with each other. Like the US is so many different opinions, and like the country is massive, so you can have camps here and camps there, whereas in New Zealand, Christianity is all lumped into sort of one thing, so anything that I guess the secular worldview opposes, they'll just stereotype Christianity as we all believe this one thing, or we all believe this other thing, so it's really hard to be able to do that, to have those discussions and be really staunch on have discussions around critical race theory and all of that carry on.
Yes.
But we need to, because that stuff
correct.
is so dominant in our world, and I think that stuff can be quite evil. Hey, when you really break down those things about how they're being outworked in society. Maybe it's about when Kanan has his Richard TV TV show.
Let's go.
Let's go. And look, we need some $1 million donors for that. So please, we'll send the account. And if you work somewhere in the city, like around wealthy, because Allah's got a whole bunch of connections here. Hey, look, I just want to. I think we've answered that question around, do you think Christians should be on social media? I think we've had a good discussion. Great to hear your perspectives. Especially you, Allah, as our social media expert with a PhD in Twitter. But I just want to go into a case study.
Sure.
So the Israel Folau stuff that was a few years ago, and he did the most sinful thing in the world where he put up a Bible verse, and I have a whole bunch of views on that. I'm sure we all do. But I wasn't really engaged in social media at that time. What was it like in those platforms at that time? Was it pretty savage, or was
that 2 years ago?
Well, I think it would have been about 2 and a bit years ago.
2018. Yeah, it was pretty hostile. I did a bit of tongue in cheek, and everyone got mad about the homosexuality, but there were actually other sins that were listed.
All the drunk people that
or fornicators that said, hold on, this applies to all of us.
Yes,
so
very interesting.
I had quite a heated discussion with a good friend who I respect, and she respects me.
All online?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but I extended the invitation to talk it out. She knows that I'm Christian and respects that. So I was just trying to explain to her, where the text comes from, what the gospel is about. So that was that one was interesting, because there was a lot of Christians that I knew were online weren't necessarily responding, which I thought was interesting.
Why do you think they weren't responding? Fear?
Perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, fear. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Maybe, fear of loss of friends, or Yeah, and the church was really weak on it too, as my personal perspective, in terms of taking a stance. So I guess back to the previous question in terms of the church and social media, I think it's also important if local churches do take on contemporary cultural issues or engage in it, that we don't also water down the gospel.
Yeah, very good idea.
Because often we find that we do to appease men, but we're not. Yeah, when
truth doesn't change just because times change.
Correct.
Very good,
yeah.
very good.
So when we stand for truth, we stand in all its fullness, as opposed to today it works for me, tomorrow it doesn't.
That's why if you have hate mail, please send them to Keenan about this podcast. Send it to Keenan. Don't send it to me. But stuff like this is going to get a whole bunch of hate like that as well. So, but that's the battles that we
correct.
face.
Yeah. So those also, like the case of Israel Folau, was an opportunity to witness as well.
Yeah. And talk about that then. So how did you do that? Was it about all on a conversation in your 150 characters? Was it? This
one was on Instagram. So okay. I got to sharing the gospel with this person, but also highlighted in terms of the text is nothing new under the sun. That the Bible is a historical text, whether you believe in it or not, but it's still facts. So
there's a whole bunch of evidence for it.
Correct. So how you feel about it and how he said it, he's not reiterating anything new. And also the argument is with, in my experience with people that disagree with the Bible, is that, well, if you don't believe in it, why do you feel some type of way?
Why do you care about it?
Correct. Yeah. So you clearly that reiterates that actually man is made in God's image, because you know that what it's saying is true, but you're reacting. You disagree. You're like in conflict because you know that it's true, but you disagree with it. So I always find it not comical, but I'm like, see, you're reiterating what the word says.
It looks like you're getting angry over nothing.
Correct. Yeah. Like, the word tells us that his laws are written in man's heart. So, and because we're made in his image, there is an innate moral compass of right and wrong according to his word. So when people react like that, it's an encouragement to me, because then I know, well, actually, you do know the Lord's word and his laws. So yeah, it's always, I have to pray a lot before I engage in those, because the flesh in me wants to just one to them, to be honest, but the spirit in me extends that grace that's been extended to me. So
I find it interesting that you were saying Christians weren't responding, and those who were active in social media, and I'm wondering why. Do you think it was the homosexuality issue? Is that the one the sacred cow that no one wants to touch?
Yeah, it's the elephant in the room. Yeah, it is. But the word is pretty clear about that. And I guess especially in this day and age of like gender fluidity or something, I don't know. There's A, B, Z to Z. But in my mind, there's only two sexes. Science proves it. You're either XX or XY. Anything in between, that's not of the Lord. But that's probably a simplistic way of putting it, and a controversial one, because it's landed me in a bit of trouble sometimes. But anyways, off topic.
But then how did you maintain your Christian witness when you're dealing with that kind of tough issue? You've obviously, Israel had done his stuff and he's still facing the consequences of which I find amazing, that he's still suffering for it. But how did you maintain your Christian witness? Was it about your daily practices, or was that one of the things that led you to actually say, I need to get off social media?
I don't respond until I've probably sought the Lord. I've sought the Lord first, then responded. Because if I'm responding in that moment, I know it's out of me as opposed to him. So a lot of it is really with wisdom and discernment. When it gets to a point where, you start to lose that Christ-likeness, because you want to win the argument. There's no point winning the argument if you've lost the person. So I would that also probably led to disengaging, but seeing that, okay, this isn't this isn't in a healthy place, social media, and I need to examine myself.
So that person that you were engaging with on Instagram, for example, you had different views, different worldviews, probably different approaches, but how were they when you were sharing about the gospel, this amazing gospel message that we have?
I've shared with her before in person.
Okay,
so this is better. A friend. Yeah. So she knows where I stand. So it always comes back to the gospel. She just agreed to disagree. She respected my worldview. I respected hers. We're still good friends. But she's a friend that we continue to pray for.
Awesome. Yeah. How did you handle this, Keenan? I mean, again, I wasn't on really on social media, just come back from overseas at that time. How did you handle it, given being someone who was deeply involved in social media?
Yeah, I did engage a little bit with the discussion around Israel Folau on Twitter, but I also, rather than arguing on Instagram there's a feature where you can let your audience respond to a question.
Oh yeah.
So I just all I did was, what are your thoughts on this, on my Instagram, and it was surprising to see some of the views, both from Christians and non-Christians, and seeing where people are at in terms of understanding the issue biblically. And I think the church does a disservice to Christians if they don't equip believers to be able to approach these contentious issues.
Very good.
And I think for me and for the Christians that I'm around, people from school, people from church, a lot of them did not speak up about the issue because they were ill-equipped.
So it was an equipping issue as an education.
I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of Christians didn't share. Obviously, there's a fear element, fear of being cancelled and things like that. Obviously, like lose friends and things like that. But I think there's definitely something that the church should identify, that we do need to be educated on these contentious social topics, and being able to provide a biblical approach to these situations for their congregants. I think that's something that's really key.
So how do we do that? What are your ideas as the young people in the room? But how do we do that? Is it a bunch of workshops? Is it preaching from the pulpit? What's...
I mean, you could go topical and start preaching on all of the social issues. The only thing is, you don't want to be that church that's just preaching about things that are wrong with the world.
And preaching on modern things, cool.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of I think young people and just church people in general need to be able to feel safe to ask these questions in church. That's one of the things that I think is important. But the other thing is that our pastoral teams, our leadership, church leaderships, need to be brave and I guess stand firm on the word, that the word is our moral compass, saying we take our cues from the word and not the world.
Very, very, very good. Ala, you're the educationalist, researcher, got 7 degrees from Otago Uni. How do we do this? How does the church respond to this gap that I'm really seeing more and more as we talk?
Yeah, I think probably piggybacking on what Kanan said, like building that biblical literacy. So when you build those foundations, like coming back to building those foundations, because if you don't have those foundations, solid and firm in the word, then you're going to be swayed by whatever the world throws at you. I think, but teaching from the pulpit, running workshops, creating environments where you can have those tough discussions in churches with leadership. I guess also reiterating what Kanan said around having courageous, bold leadership that don't shy away from these tough issues. It's nothing new under the sun, as we know. So why are we wavering when we know that the word is true and that is throughout the ages and his truth is infallible?
Then if I was playing a little bit of devil's advocate, if I was a Christian here, would say, well, man, you guys are just being too dogmatic. You guys are just being too, focused too much on doctrine and all that kind of stuff. It's all about love. We should love. Where does the love factor come in? This is, how would you respond? And to say, because we all know there was a whole bunch of Christians that came out against Israel Folau, and they saw it in a different perspective. So, playing devil's advocate, how do we respond to those people who are saying, well, you guys are just taking a hardline stance?
Right. I would probably challenge them back and ask, well, what exactly is your definition of love? Because we know that God is love, but he's also a God of wrath and justice. He's holy and requires his bride to be pure and faithful to him. So how do you define love? Because love also means that you, you correct people and correct them in love. The word tells us we correct in love, we rebuke in love. And just like a parent is with a child, right? They don't always give them lollies. They give them vegetables and the child might hate it and it might not feel like love, but the parent knows that it's good for them. So it comes down to what exactly do you define as love? that's probably the academic response.
Yeah, very good. Kenya, do you have a response to that? I mean, because a whole bunch said, well, Israel was wrong. That's not what the Bible said. How, you guys are just being too focused on this truth stuff.
Yeah. I think there is a way to call out sin in a loving way.
Yeah.
So I think I can see the nuance of why, some Christians would disagree with the way he went about the issue. So I think there is a particular way that you can address sin without being intentionally offensive.
Yeah.
Obviously, the gospel is offensive by nature. We
Yes,
know that
it is.
Yeah.
because it goes against our nature, our sin nature, and you're telling people that you're wrong. But I think there is definitely a better way, or I guess there are better ways to approach sin. I think it would have gone very differently if Israel had said this in a small group or something like that, or from the church pulpit. But I think also with social media, it's just really hard to control where the message lands.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. There's so much you can't control.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know if obviously this is something that Christians all around the world believe.
Correct.
Why he chose to, make his stance here, I'm not too sure. I'm not saying that I don't disagree with the verse that he's quoted, but I definitely see that there is nuance there. In ways that we can approach it.
Yeah, look, and I think if you're listening and this has prodded some of your thinking, especially of the Israel stuff, and maybe you do think that this is too dogmatic and you guys are just stuck on teaching and doctrine and truth, and that, man, we'd love to hear from you. We don't want to just hear from our friends that say go hard, but if you disagree with this stuff, man, we'd love to have that discussion as people who are professing Christians. I think this stuff is really important. I just want to say, I'm quite encouraged hearing you young people talk about these young issues. I'm quite encouraged because I think this is stuff that we're not talking about enough as the church.
Yeah.
And this is where the majority of these people, in fact, but also these younger generations are engaging.
Yeah.
Now it makes sense, Kanan, why you're always throwing different stuff at me. It makes a lot of sense, but I rebuke you now. So I just want to touch quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we could go down to vote national vote Labour here, but just Christian and politics. Like, is there a difference between engaging online around conservative issues and Christian issues, or are they one and the same? Because I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I know you engage in that space. You have some strong political views, which are absolutely fine. But is there a difference there?
Man, that one is, that's a good question. One that I'm still really navigating and figuring out, what's the answer? But I think they're two, conservatism in terms of as an ideology stems from Christian doctrine.
But you don't need to be a Christian to be a conservative.
No, correct.
Views,
correct. Yeah. But so I think when it comes to being...
What is conservatism? What's a simple definition of if I'm listening, what does that conservative progressive mean? What does that mean?
So the conservative ideology really is around protecting certain they call institutions, or things like family and government and state. So distinguishing those things. A lot of the emphasis on conservatism is strengthening the family unit and the individual, and making sure there's a clear separation of state and family. So
Cool.
there's less of a dependence on the state and more of around the family and equipping the individual in that family unit.
I've often heard that it's personal responsibility versus collective.
Correct.
So it's
I
can get off my ass, go and work, or I can rely on the system.
It's probably
so that kind of
simpler
stuff.
way to put it. Yeah,
that's cool. So then how do you navigate that as a Christian? Are you posting about conservative issues or a conservative perspective on an issue, or is it about a Christian perspective on an issue, or is that one and the same? That's the same. Yeah.
No, they're not. I don't believe they're one and the same.
Yep, okay.
I think one feeds into the other. I always see conservative things as feeding into Christian, a segue into gospel conversations.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely, the conservative view isn't necessarily welcome in New Zealand. I think because it challenges a lot of the sort of what is normalized in terms of dependence on state and this idea of social justice and equity. It challenges those things that we see as really, I don't believe they're right. You can't write wrongs of another wrong. So it challenges a lot of what is normal now in terms around like social justice, like equitable things. Like,
but those are dominant narratives. Those are dominant things that we hear today about equity, social justice, race-based kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's it.
So anything that goes against that, that's what you say would be challenging to.
Yeah. So the conservative thought does that, but it challenges it in a way that actually we're putting a lot of attention and light on issues that aren't necessarily in the scheme of things, like, how do I put this? That it doesn't, it challenges it because we're putting a lot of attention on things that aren't necessarily not sustainable, but like we don't look at core issues like disintegration of families, this reliance on state. There's a heavy push towards it these days, as opposed to like, well, what are we actually doing to strengthen our families? There's a lot of moving away from the family unit. Like I'm big on that because, you know, family is God designed, and there's a reason why family, you know, but when the state starts to interfere with the family unit, of course there's going to be disharmony. So I think conservatism challenges that in terms of the role of state and family.
So when you were watching the elections last year, you saw the referendum, we touched on the cannabis stuff, there was the euthanasia stuff.
Yeah.
And you weren't engaging in social media at that. Had you come off?
I was.
You were engaging.
So I came off after.
Okay. So you did your gambling your addiction self-exclusion after. So what was it like there? I mean, was it pretty sad? I mean, you've talked about the cannabis, so you did say it was pretty savage, but how were you engaging personally in that though? Was it more about you needed to go back to your disciplines and your faith, or what was your process in that time? Because it was pretty heated from the cannabis stuff that I saw online, but how did you engage?
How did I engage? With wisdom. I was very prayerful and just made sure that if I hadn't kept the main things in my daily practices, like being in the Word, fellowship, being in prayer, then I wasn't going to engage online. I also
that's quite wise.
Yeah, it was more of I knew that when it got to a point, and it did at some points, that it wasn't honoring the Lord. That was sort of heavy on me. So
do you think sometimes your political views take over?
Yes.
Your Christian views?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So talk that through.
So a lot of that was coming back to the Word and checking in and knowing that actually my identity is in Christ first, that I'm a believer first and everything else flows from that. Sort of similar to, I guess, cultural identity. I always tell people that I'm a believer first and then Tongan Samoan flows from that. And that's a distinction I'm having to make a lot more these days and clearly articulate it to people so that in light of what's happening with social justice and race issues, those things can swap for some people.
I've written a really good article that you might like.
Perfect.
That might create a whole bunch of hate on about identity. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Let's put it online. I'll put it on my. Bina, let's start a Twitter feed. We need a Twitter or something.
Let's go.
And then I'll be looking for a new job. There you go. Kanan, how did you handle the election stuff? I don't know. Were you involved in these political discussions? Is that even interesting to you?
Not really.
Yeah, fair enough.
I did shop around and I went to a few national events, but also Labour events. But I would say I'm probably politically agnostic.
Yeah, fair enough.
Politically homeless, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I see that, none of the parties, even the parties that front as a Christian party, don't necessarily align with what I believe in or what I think is best for this country. Either one of the parties would be have very good morals but very stink policy, and then on the other end we have very good, very stink morals but very good policy. So it's hard to find something that you agree with.
And I find that fascinating because I work in politics, so I find that really fascinating because I really don't care about politics, but for me it's the gospel. But I find it fascinating that as Christians we are meant to engage in these different spheres. I don't believe in kingdom or dominion theology, so don't get me wrong there. But I believe that as Christians, we are to be salt and light. That's coming back to what we talked about, to be salt, whether it's Canaan in media, whether it's you, Allah, in education or policy that you're in now. How do we work in those spaces? And I guess the biggest learning that I'm getting today is how important social media and online stuff could be in this, or should be maybe, in our thinking as Christians in 2021, which I could sense, I could see and I could hear, but I'm really beginning to understand that a little bit more today. So I'm really blessed. Can I just transition to maybe just rounding up our discussion, if that's all right, Alan? I guess we've sort of answered this question already. Should Christians be engaging in social media? Hey, with balance? Yeah, you talked about that.
With wisdom.
With wisdom,
Yeah.
checking things. I really like your focus on checking your own disciplines as a Christian, making sure that your time in the Lord, time in the Word. I would really encourage, how do you get support from your local church or other believers? I just wonder about the trolling and the hate, and for people that are. My example is I love doing street preaching. I'm scared of it. I'm nervous of it, but I love doing it, and I love doing it with a group, with other believers. But I've seen a whole bunch of other people go out on their own and very isolated in those things. And it always reminds me of what Peter says, that the enemy is like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. So I would really encourage, and I think we all would, if you would agree with me, that if you are engaging in the social media stuff, have your disciplines as a Christian, but also make sure that you've got other support as well, because this stuff can be pretty savage. And we're talking about mental health, anxiety, the stress, all the other kind of stuff that goes into our mind. So I think we've got that. I guess, and I know we have touched on this throughout it, but Allah, if you could just answer this then, how do we share the gospel then on social media?
Yeah.
How do we, if we're talking about homelessness or euthanasia, how do we get to that point? Or we're talking about something controversial like Israel Folau, how do we get to that point?
I guess the only social media I'm on is like Facebook.
Right now?
Yeah.
But you might have a launch party according to Canaan soon.
I like engaging, or I'm still trying to find a way to engage sort of the contemporary cultural and social issues, and how to engage how do I engage those things in the gospel? Like, I'm still sort of like, for me, like, how do I engage faith and academia? So these are two worlds of mine that really go hand in hand, but currently they are always in conflict. So yeah, I guess I always repost like verses or other social media platforms that are really doing the gospel in a way that applies to contemporary issues. So I think it depends on who you follow. Like, I make sure the people that I follow on Facebook are majority like theology based or Christian and Bible believing Christians, because there's a whole lot of Christians out there and you read their doctrine, you're like, oh, that doesn't check out. So make sure that people you do follow online, that they check out biblically and their sound doctrine as well. And that way you can also trick the algorithms in terms of your social media. So that when you go
What's the algorithm? What's that?
So you explain it, Canaan, because you
some black magic mysticism.
No. So I think it's like, if you the way that some of these social media companies are done, like if you like certain things, that's what they keep feeding. So if you
ones
go
and zeros.
Coding
yeah,
stuff.
that's it.
PlayStation 9.
So make sure the things that you are liking are, like, I was intentional in just making sure I followed like preachers I liked, or historical thing like Christian history that I like, so those would feed my social media, as opposed to liking these food videos or something. So even that was an intentional thing of mine, to make sure that even if I went on social media for 10-15 minutes a day, I wasn't seeing rubbish. I was seeing things that would encourage me in the word or spur me on to the word.
That's a great practical tip. Actually. Yep, very good.
But so that, and to segue into how to share the gospel, those things enabled me to share the gospel. So I would repost, or if someone did like a blog that captured the gospel, that had the gospel, but the gospel applied to a contemporary issue, I would just reshare it. So there's a lot of good stuff out there overseas that isn't necessarily in New Zealand. That's my experience. I don't know if that's Canaan.
What the same thing is liking all of the Christian resources that are available online. One of the funny things with the Facebook algorithm, it sort of just categorizes all the Christian content and so on. So sometimes I'll have Paul Washer show up on my timeline, and then I'll have Joel Osteen as the next post. So
well, you do look a bit like a Joel Osteen guy. If you can't see Kate, he does look pretty slick right now.
This is my Bible.
Very good, very good. So it's about being intentional about that stuff as well. Very good.
Like, I go live as well a lot of times on TikTok just to discuss religion.
Awesome.
And the cool thing about TikTok is when you go live, all of your followers get notification that you're live, and you can put a topic on the notification. So you could say like religion or Christianity, and all of those people who follow you get a notification that you're talking about it live. There's also a feature where you can bring up to 4 people on live as well and have discussions about religion. So if someone has a question, they'll send you a request and you can chat online while other people are watching videos. So that's one of the things I've been doing just in the last month on TikTok, and just having discussions around Christian faith and Christian morality is probably the big one on TikTok.
I really commend you on that, bro. Are there others doing this stuff from a New Zealand, Pacifica local context?
Might be in New Zealand, definitely not Pacifica.
Okay.
The only one is that guy I sent you.
Oh, okay, that was terrible. That was terrible stuff.
So there's a lot of unbiblical Christian content online. And I think it's important that there is some kind of engagement there from a biblical perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, family, if you're, for those, for my mum that's still listening, can I just ask? But for those that are listening, that are you are engaging in this space, or you want to, and you want to represent Christ in this kind of, in these platforms or these spheres, can you holler at us? We would love to pray with you.
Yeah.
We would love to maybe connect you to what Canaan's doing. But whether you're 75 years old or you're 15 years old, but if you want to engage in this stuff, man, I guess I keep coming back to one of the biggest learnings that I've gotten from today is about how does the church respond? How does the body of Christ respond to not just the gospel conversations, the Israel Folau kind of things, but the intersectionality of stuff. That's a big word, but what that really means is how do we deal with these modern things like social justice, like critical race theory. People think, oh, that's just academic stuff. Actually, that stuff is all over your life if you don't know it.
Correct.
And so if you don't know that kind of stuff, that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, is because we're going to start attacking some of those issues very soon, because a lot of that stuff is unbiblical and wicked. And so we really want to get to that point. Is this a ministry for you, Allah? Is this kind of stuff a ministry, or is this something that you're doing just because you're good at it?
I've never had to think about that. I guess in my experience, I mean, I've never really viewed social media as a ministry until recent, as in these past few years, as a platform to witness.
Well, can I ask then, should it be a ministry?
Yeah.
For you? Or for you, or for us as Christians?
Yeah, I think it should be a ministry. It should be a ministry, whether it's for me or not. That is on the Lord's timing and a prayer point. I guess I enjoy engaging in that platform because the reach is bigger in some ways too, and I'm not on TikTok, but that Canaan's is on the money with TikTok because we even have up to 10-year-olds on TikTok. Yeah, that's crazy, and the amount of things that 10-year-olds put on there that say, people that shouldn't see what kids are putting out see it, is just, it baffles me. It is a place that needs salt and light, social media in general, but so totally used to it being a ministry.
Is it a ministry for you, Canaan? You're pretty deep in the world.
Probably not a formal ministry, just I wouldn't call my life a ministry, but I do minister to people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So using what I have, the people who are around me, obviously, sharing the gospel with them, and that translates to social media as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit about, the ministry that we do in our life, sharing the gospel with people, being the salt and light in our real life. Yeah. That does translate onto the social media as well.
Very good.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think I like the way that you because it's not about separating this stuff and saying that social media is a different Canaan, and then the real life Canaan is a different Canaan. It is about actually how do we represent Christ in all facets of our life, whether it's work, play, or the other stuff that we do in life. Hey, Allah, I've been really blessed listening to you. Hey, I was gonna ask all these other hard questions about life and marriage and all that kind of stuff. But I've been really blessed.
Canaan, not me.
Well, but we know that they're shutting down Alfriston Road or for the wedding, because it's going to be a procession for Canaan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like Prince Hakeem from Coming to America. Getting married. So it's going to be huge in South Auckland when Canaan gets married too. And she's a Mangile girl too. Yeah.
We're getting married in Mangile.
Is that right? Yeah. Well, they all come to Mangere in the end. Very good, very good. Praise the Lord. It's going to be a huge wedding. Don't worry. It'll be on social media, buddy. It'll be all my platforms, on Bebo, on MySpace. It'll be on all my platforms. Do those things still exist, Bebo and MySpace?
I don't know. They've been bought out.
Because I'm still getting notifications. I'm still getting that stuff. Okay. Look, there's some really there's some other big stuff that we haven't had a chance to get to, and think of big terms right like now, like cancel culture and all that kind of stuff. And I think we'd love to get to that. I would love to have you back if you're interested, Alla, to hear those now, because you got a PhD in Twitter. So we would love to have that chat. But sis, I guess just quickly, I don't know, Kanan, do you have any closing words before we hand it over, bro?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Been really blessed. Alla, I just want to say it's been really cool. I've been actually personally challenged about this kind of stuff today, about social media and the platforms and gospel and all that kind of stuff. And we've actually, as a group of brothers, opened up a Twitter and a TikTok.
Oh, yep.
Yep. And so we're going to start causing some trouble.
Let's go.
With language-specific gospel videos, language-specific content in the Cook Island language, Samoan, Tongan, Niuean, and actually start talking about some of these issues a bit more, but in shorter forms and stuff like that. So I've been really challenged and encouraged from today. But Alla, we leave the last word to our guest.
Oh.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any special message or shout-out or promotion or bank account number that you want to give for people to donate into your new social media ministry. But we try and leave the last word to our guests, just to say any final thoughts and then give your last encouragement. That'll be us.
Oh, sure. It's been an absolute pleasure. Never would I have thought that I'd be speaking about social media and being a Christian on social media. I guess my biggest encouragement is, to always check back against the word. I have a psalm that I always keep in mind in terms of the field that I'm in. So Psalms 119, 128. Therefore, all your precepts concerning all things I consider to be right. I hate every false way. James 1:19 speaks, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. So as you engage in conversations, be it online or in person, the Lord, His word tells us how we are to carry ourselves and our conduct in those conversations. And may it be glorifying unto Him always. Bless you. And whoever's listening to this, may it be edifying to you. And check everything that we've said against the word.
Yeah, especially what I said. Especially what
Second
I said.
that.
MySpace and Bebo. Can I just say, if there's stuff that pricked your thinking today, or any of the other podcasts that we've talked about some massive issues on these shows already, and especially today, then feel free to engage with us on social media, on the different platforms that we have. We'd love to hear from you, both good and bad, and we're happy to have those discussions. And as I've learned from Alla today as well, if there's things that you want to discuss in public, if you're in face-to-face, if you're in Auckland or you see us around, I know that Kanan would love to shout you out to coffee and have some of these deep discussions. Hey, Kanan. But I guess, again, if there's stuff that has got your attention, got your thinking, I'm really blessed to have that last encouragement about how we should be doing our social media lives in a way that would glorify God and that would extend His kingdom. So on behalf of the Fresh Truth family, from my brother Kanan and me, Ronji, God bless you, family. See you next time to a fast way forward.
Going in, never back down. We on a hard trip. Going in, never back down. We on a hard trip. Going in, never back down. We on a hard trip. We on that Christ mode. We on that Christ mode. Going